Hello dear learners, welcome back to your English class. Today we will be starting chapter 2 from the book Buzzword under the theme Exploring Space, and the title of chapter 2 is Feathered Friend, and it has been written by Arthur C. Clarke. As we know, the theme of this unit is exploring space. So if you carefully observe this picture, you will come to know that it is a space station. And there are some scientists and astronauts working in the space station. So what is the suspense of the story? Let's read the story and find it out. A space station is a spacecraft capable of supporting crew members and designed to remain in space for an extended period of time and for other spacecraft to dock. So a space station is a scientifically designed spacecraft which is capable of supporting crew members who can live inside it in the space, and it has been designed in such a special manner that it can sustain in the space for a longer period of time and for other spacecraft to dock. The International Space Station is the only operational manned space station currently in the orbit. At present, there is only one space station which is active in the orbit, that is International Space Station. So before we move further, let's have a glance about some more information on International Space Station. This is the picture of International Space Station. This is how it looks from inside. How the astronauts work inside the space station. How cheerful they are looking. The International Space Station is a modular space station in low Earth orbit. It's a multinational collaborative project involving 5 participating space agencies: NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, ESA, CSA. So you have to give me the full form of these: NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, ESA and CSA. The ownership and use of the space station is established by intergovernmental treaties and agreements. Let's have some glance on the data now. Orbit height, it's 408 kilometer. We have read it's situated or active in low Earth orbit. Speed on orbit, it's 7.66 km per second. And how much cost has been done on this International Space Station? That is 15,000 crores USD dollars. So this is bit information I try to give you about International Space Station. Space stations are used to study the effects of long-term space flight on human body. So purpose of the space station is to study the effects of long-term space flight on a human body. If you remain in the space for a longer period of time, what kind of an adverse effect it would lay on your human body. Then also serve as a platform for extended scientific studies. Each crew member stays aboard the station for weeks or months, but rarely more than a year. So max to max time span they could live in a space station is 1 year. They spend some weeks or the months in the space station. Space stations have been used for both military and civilian purposes. Now a question comes, what do you think are the challenges of living on a space station for longer periods of time? Discuss with your partner. So this activity I have given the students to explore more about the challenges faced by the astronauts while living on a space station. That has to be completed. That is your homework, so do it yourself. The narrator is surprised to discover a canary in the space station, but how did it get it there? Read on to find out. So the narrator is surprised. Surprise means astonished or flabbergasted to discover or find a canary in the space station. You want to see what a canary is? This beautiful yellow colored bird is known as canary, and the narrator was dumbstruck to find a canary in the space station, which is next to impossible. How did it get it there? How did it reach into the space station? Let's find out. To the best of my knowledge, there has never been a rule that forbids one to keep pets in the space station. So there is no such rules and regulations that you can't keep a pet in the space station. It's not written in the book of the rules, but even had such a rule existed, I'm quite certain that Sviven Olsen would have ignored it. The narrator said that though there is no rule existed in the that forbids to keep the pet in the space station, and even if any such rule existed, that would not be applicable on Sviven Olsen because he would have ignored it. But I must admit that his selection was sensible. He did not keep any of the pet in the space station. He made a sensible choice. What did it choose? What did he choose to take into the space station? He chose a canary to take into the space station. Caribel weighed practically nothing. Her food requirements were minimal and she was not worried, as most animals would have been, by the absence of gravity. Why this selection was a sensible selection? Because it weighed particularly nothing. It was very light in weight. Caribel is very light in weight. The food requirements of the caribel or the canary were minimal. And it was not worried at all like the most of the others animals would have been if they would taken to a place where there is no gravity, or if they were taken in the absence of gravity. Absence of gravity, you know that what is a gravity. The sensation of weightlessness experienced in space when there is no such force which causes things to drop to the ground like on Earth, like floating in the air. That is the absence of gravity. I first became aware that Caribel was aboard the space station when I was sitting in my office checking through my list to decide what items we would be running out of next. So the narrator was sitting inside the space station. When he became aware the Caribel was aboard the space station, he was sitting in his office and preparing a list of the things which were running short of. When I heard the musical whistle beside my ear, I assumed that it had come over the space station intercom. When he heard that musical whistle for the first time, he mistook it at that it could be the sound of, or it could be the sound which came from the station intercom, and he waited for the announcement to follow it. He expected that some announcement was going to be received, so he waited for that announcement, but it was his misconception. It didn't. Instead, there was a long involved pattern of melody that made me look up with such a start. But when he heard the voice continuously, a pattern of melody, he was startled, he was startled, he was surprised, he was astonished, and he looked up with such a surprise. It was then that I had my first view of Clarabelle. At that time, he looked up and he could see a bird in the space station. Which bird was it? It was Caribel. See the inside of the space station. The Caribel is there. The astronauts are there. Now let's read further. She was a small yellow canary hanging in the air, as motionless as a hummingbird, and with much less effort, for her wings were quietly folded along her sides. So it was a very small yellow color bird. It was hanging in the air, as motionless as a hummingbird, as it was very less in weight. It was floating without less effort, for her wings, which were quite folded along her sides. We stared at each other for a minute, and then, before I had quite recovered my wits, she did a curious kind of backward loop. Northbound canary had ever managed, and departed with a few leisurely flicks. So the astronauts, including the narrator, they were dumbstruck, they were awestruck, they were wonderstruck, they were shell-shocked to see the canary in the space station, and before the narrator could get his senses back, She did a curious kind of backward loop. She made a twist in the air like no earthbound canary had ever managed, and departed with a few leisurely flicks. It made some rapid movements, light rapid movements, and it made a backward loop in the air. It was quite obvious that she had already learned how to operate in the absence of gravity and did not believe in doing unnecessarily work. The way it was performing or surviving in the space station, it was apparent that it was quite obvious that the canary was taught how to operate itself in the absence of gravity, and which was a quite astonishing fact. Sven did not confess of her ownership for several days. By that time, it no longer mattered because Caribel was a general pet. Sven Olsen had taken the canary into the space station, but he did not disclose this fact to anyone. He did not confess her ownership for several days, and in the meantime, Caribel had become a general pet. He had smuggled her up on the last ferry from Earth when he came back from leave. Partly he claimed out of her sheer scientific curiosity. So when he joined the space station back after his leave, he smuggled up. Smuggled means when you import or export something illegally for which you are not given the permission or granted the permission. So if you do so, that is known as smuggling. So he had also smuggled up the little canary in the last ferry. What is the ferry? Ferry is an aircraft that brings passengers or the goods to space. He wanted to see just how a bird would operate when it had no weight but could still use its wings. So he wanted to make an experiment that how would a bird would operate which is very less in weight, which has approximately no weight but could still use its wings. So he wanted to make that experiment. Caribel thrived and grew healthy. As he made some investment in the bird could survive. Thrived means survived, and grew healthy. On the whole, we had little trouble concealing means hiding our unauthorized guest. Now there was a big challenge for the astronauts that how they could hide the canary from the unauthorized guest means the other official persons, the bird who brought to the space station as a pet without any official permission. From the VIPs, VIP means very important persons from the earth came visiting. That how they can hide the canary in the space station from the VIPs, those who are visiting the space station from the earth. A space station has more hiding places than you can count. The only problem was that canary got rather noisy when she was upset. So we know that now there are lots of technical things in the space station, and it's not difficult to hide something in the space station. But what was the big challenge in front of them? That it was a bird, it was a live being, and it created a lot of noise when it was upset. We sometimes had to think fast to explain the curious peeps and whistles. Sometimes the scientist had to give an explanation from where that curious peeps or the whistles or the sounds came. So I think this is enough for the day. The next part of the chapter we will be covering in our next video. Read the chapter again. Make an assignment in which you will write those 5 parties which have made the international space stations, including NASA and I forgot Roscosmos and the rest 3 of them. And you have to give the answers that what kind of the difficulties faced by the people who live in the space station. Complete the assignment in your fair notebook, which is given by me, and have a great day. Stay tuned for the next part.